Thank you very much. John Bryant is also my friend and mentor. Thank you. Because in all of the things that he described about me, which are flattering and somewhat true sometimes, but you don't see a thing in there about economics. And one of the things we could not do in the civil rights movement was talk about distribution of wealth, because that made you communist. In fact, once I got involved in politics, I realized that there wasn't much wealth to distribute, and that the challenge is not so much distributing wealth as generating wealth. That meant you had to understand the private sector. Now, when we talk about financial literacy, we're not just talking about poor people and children. We're going through a stage where I think the global economy is sort of like my 16-year-old grandson. He's tall and brilliant and good-looking, but he stumbles over his own feet. You can't trust him with a car yet. He's an adolescent. And I think we have a global economy in its adolescence. And we haven't yet figured out how we're going to relate to China, how we're going to relate to Africa, how we're going to include the world into an economic theory that makes sense. The Bretton Woods agreements did well from 44 to 73. I was in Congress when they ended them. Nobody knew why, and nobody discussed it. And we got distracted by Watergate, and Congress never revisited it. I had just left Congress when they ended up repealing Regulation Q. And all I knew was, I was at the UN then, that the savings and loans were having problems, but we never stopped to discuss it because Republicans and Democrats were at each other and not on the subject. What John Bryant and Operation Hope has done, and what the President is doing, I hope, at noon today, is bringing us back together to discuss. I said, Humpty Dumpty, the economy is also like Humpty Dumpty. It fell off the wall, and all the king's horses and all the king's men got together and selected Barack Obama to try to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And when it comes time to put him back together again, the question I hear all the time is, what about us? Well, John Bryant and Operation Hope has brought us together to not only talk to each other about how this global economy is affecting us or eliminating us or ignoring us, but we will view the President's message together, and we will really be like a global cabinet for their almost, 20 countries and 6 continents present here. This is probably the most economically diverse group, and with me on the bottom amongst the poorest of the poor. But we have an opportunity here, I think, to begin to bring an element of financial understanding to a lot of very, very complicated things. I was reading this morning about long-term capital. Is that the group that had the 2 Nobel Prize winners that had it all figured out? And then all of a sudden, everything they figured out turned out to be not so true after about 4 years. So financial literacy is something that I think must claim us all, not just today, but for decades and generations to come. We must have an economy that works for all of God's children, that feeds the hungry, clothes the naked, heals the sick, houses the homeless, generates wealth and ideas to make the earth meaningful to all God's children. And we welcome you to such a summit, and we invite you to express your mind, your heart, and put your soul into this thing.